Oh, we're not done yet. Ha 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 ha!
Anti-worm, can't you bother someone else?
Oh, not so fast. I heard you like fighting games, so I went and got you a little something. Turn around.
This better be good. Son of a bitch. Joke's on you, fuckhead. I ain't playing this game.
On the contrary, my friend, I have insurance to make sure you're gonna play that game. Ha 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 ha!
What are you gonna fucking do?
Play it, or this game gets it. Don't try me, fuckhead.
Anyways, hello everyone, I'm Dr. Robotic, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be reviewing Fantasy Strike, a game that is not very good. Fantasy Strike is a game done by Serlin Games, headed up by former pro fighting game player David Serlin. David Serlin prior to this was known primarily as the guy who rebalanced Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo via their HD remixes. And he also has a card game designed after fighting games called Yomi, named after the Japanese term for reading one's mind. This game primarily takes place in the universe of Yomi, where the cast finally gets to play like a fighting game. Serlin intended Fantasy Strike to be a teaching tool for newcomers to the fighting genre, and stripped down the genre to its basics, with focus primarily on neutral fundamentals to help them get up to speed, but the game was also designed with the intent to be difficult to master by not sacrificing the depth of the genre, leaving veterans satisfied in theory. The game was originally attempted to be crowdfunded, but it didn't meet its goals, so it was at risk of being cancelled. Serlin then put the game up on early access to at least ensure they could fund the rest of the game from early access sales, which seemed to do the trick as the game was able to go free to play in the summer of 2020 after its release on July 25th, 2019. The game was also set to have a decent online experience out the gate by featuring both crossplay and rollback netcode, please adopt these people, and when the game went free to play, 2 bonus characters were also added for free, which is pretty neat. Now onto the story. Fantasy Strike takes place in a kingdom known as Flagstone, a dictatorship ran by kids, and a moral ruler that's known for its absolute hatred and xenophobia. Rook, a golem, holds the tournament in an attempt to unite the people of Flagstone against Kint in an attempt to overthrow him. Canonically, Grave wins the tournament, and while he's initially disinterested, he decides to use his position as champion to try to overthrow Kint's dictatorship. There's also a bunch of other characters, but outside of Valerie and Rook, almost everyone here feels like an afterthought. In fact, most of the endings in this game feel like nothing burger rewards, to the point that I feel that even Twisted Metal 1's text-based endings feel more satisfying to have. Or at least those give you a reward, whereas these are just meandering. Hell, Valerie's story seems to set her up to desire revenge against Kint, but she does nothing in her ending to get revenge. Like, she has the biggest bone to pick with him because his police force murdered her girlfriend due to his homophobia. Not to mention, this game attempts to have social commentary on serious issues in the real world, but I honestly feel that while the intent is very good, I don't feel that it's executed very well, as the story of this game feels extremely bland and forgettable. But in all fairness, this is a fighting game, and unless your name is Guilty Gear, most stories in fighting games are usually just an excuse to go bash some skulls in, so I'm not going to harp too bad here on the story itself. What I will do is talk about how lame these characters are. Almost everyone here feels like a bootleg of a better character design. Grave and Jaina feel like Chinese knockoff versions of Hanzo and Fuma from World Heroes, which is funny to me because those characters are derivative of Ryu and Ken. In fact, these characters are so lame and forgettable, I compiled a montage of characters more memorable than these schmucks right here. In fact, now is a good time to segue into the presentation. The presentation for this game feels extremely bland. Most of the fonts used feel rather generic, and the graphics, while not horrible, feel underwhelming. This makes me feel like I'm playing a free-to-play mobile game instead of an indie fighting game. I mean, I guess you could kind of say that this is free-to-play, but I've seen better free-to-play looking games that were indie also, so there's no excuse. The super animations, though, are extremely fucking lame, to the point where I feel that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite had better level 3 animations. You know, the game where the pennant stare is nothing more than a glorified gif of death. I know Serlin was tight on funds, but I'm gonna be honest, I feel that the lower budgeted Power Rangers Battle for the Grid ends up having a better presentation here. The voice acting is also extremely bland and not very good, and the music is really unmemorable. The comic book style cutscenes look kinda nice, but the lame stories and mediocre voice acting though undercut it. Twisted Metal 2 endings, these are not. Now onto the gameplay, which is the real meat and potatoes of a fighting game. Most fighting games, as we know, are usually 4 to 6 button affairs with 8 directions and command inputs that usually consist of quarter circles and complex combos, which is the tried and true method of most awesome fighting games. However, one downside of that typical control method is that it makes the genre a little intimidating to newcomers. Fantasy Strike decides to be a massively simplified game for newcomers to help get them up to speed on how fighting games play, so they can eventually transition to all the Street Fighters, the Mortal Kombats, the Guilty Gears, and the Tekkens out there. This on its own is actually not a bad thing I want to mention, provided the depth of the genre is retained. You don't need complexity to make a deep game. Dive Kick, for example, is just dive and kick, but it's a very good deep game of wits. As a result, this game is a 4-button fighter. 1 button for normal attacks, 2 for special attacks, and 1 for jumping. Hell, it's so simple you can play this on a Guitar Hero controller. No, really, this match right here was done here with the Guitar Hero controller for real. Here's video proof of me using the guitar. And it's actually kinda cool. Yeah, honestly, this is actually kinda rad. Normals can have some directional commands, but it's only for like 1 or 2 attacks, and pushing a direction for some specials can lead to different effects, but it's usually minimal. Most of the time, the attacks are the same as if you press the button. Supers are done by pressing both special buttons, and throws are also done by pressing both normal and jump. Movement is also strictly just forward and backward with the occasional jump, so there's no crouches. So it's only one directional blocking as well. So far, this doesn't sound too bad, as not only does this game primarily feel neutral focused to teach fundamentals, but the combat is easy to explain to a layman. However, with this simplicity comes problems. First off, I want to discuss throw teching. In Fantasy Strike, to tech a throw, you just do nothing. Like, literally, you do nothing, and this thing called the Yomi counter activates. This is how you tech throws. On its own, this does not sound too bad at first, as it sounds like a clever way to teach newcomers to not mindlessly mash buttons. So, what's the problem here? Well, in most fighting games, to tech throws, you press the throw input as you get grabbed to break the throw. This contradicts my basic fighting game knowledge that I've known for, like, at least a decade since I've been playing fighting games. And in theory, this can make throws, which are usually intended to break guards, useless at high level if both players know to do nothing. Also, due to the fact that crouching isn't a thing, and due to no strengths, I can't really use footsies to help space out my opponent very well, and this is going to require me to explain some fighting game terminology. Footsies is a term which refers to players purposely whipping out attacks to keep players at a distance, usually by either using hard or medium crouching kicks to keep the player away depending on the game. This is usually done in slower paced games though, like Street Fighter or Samurai Showdown, which Fantasy Strike seems to be emulated. And due to the fact that there's no crouching, as I mentioned earlier, you can't really high-low mix up the player. While this is a simple way to help get players up to speed since you only need to block one way, this removes some strategy. And while on the topic of attacks, due to the limited move pool, I feel a lot of combo routes are also really stale, with very few big combo routes to go with as well, or extra options, which I feel can limit player expression and also limits the depth of the game as well. And while I don't think games need big fancy combos to do well like fucking Guilty Gear, hell, Samurai Showdown has no traditional combos, but that game retains a good sense of depth due to being full of mind games. Fantasy Strike's mind games though feel very limited by comparison due to the game lacking strength-based attack stat punishes don't feel very strong. And due to the fact that everyone usually has like 5 to 8 hit points and most attacks usually deal 1 outside of a few, and we'll get there in a bit, this really limits a lot of actual punish options. I also want to discuss the characters a bit here. Every character here embodies a specific archetype here, and most of them do a decent job translating the archetype well to a simplified fighting game. For example, Grave and Jaina are our basic Shotos, where Grave favors defense and Jaina favors offense. Guide your heroes are defensive charge-based zoner similar to Guile.
Aha! We caught these guys ripping off Capcom.
And Rook is our grappler like Zangief and Potemkin, and so on and so forth. If you're familiar with fighting games, you'll find someone to latch onto, and if you aren't familiar with the genre, this can help you understand how each playstyle works. But there's a dark underbelly to this. The balance in this game feels, in my opinion, questionable. I'm not going to say I'm the highest level Fantasy Strike player out there, so to some experienced competitive player, this may make me sound like a super salty scrub lord, so my opinion could be wrong. But I feel that some characters in this game are utter bullshit to fight. First off, let's discuss Rook. Rook is a grappler, as I've already mentioned, and in most fighting games, grapplers are pretty tricky to play and master due to them not only being slow, but their inputs also contain either half circle or full circle inputs depending on the game. This is to balance out how strong their moves are. You want big damage, you gotta do a full 360 plus a punch button to get that spinning pile driver. Now, imagine you're playing something like Guilty Gear, and the Potemkin Buster is a one-button attack. That's Rook. It doesn't help that a lot of Rook's attacks help him get in when I try to zone him out with Geiger, and when he gets in, he deals massive damage. And while I don't mind grapplers having some armored moves to help them at least get in, that's usually for more faster-paced games like Guilty Gear to actually ensure the grapplers can keep up, and there's always something that balances the grapplers, such as really slow speed and no dashes, like again, Potemkin. Potemkin is high tier in XX, but he's really balanced in that game, and I don't feel like he's bullshit. Rook, however, feels like they made him too good, and add in one-button grapples that deal 2 hit points worth of damage, I feel he's a little bullshit to fight. And again, I could just be a little salty bitch, but Battle for the Grid has grapplers that feel inherently more fair to fight against, and that game also uses simple inputs, so there's no excuse here. Then we got Lum, who initially seems to be a takeoff of Blanca, but in actual practice plays more like Faust from Guilty Gear. I'm gonna be frank, a character like this should not have Blanca's mobility. He's meant to be the character that you can't predict, but he shouldn't have rush-down tactics. Not to mention that he shouldn't also have Faust's item throws you can't really air guard in this game like you can in Guilty Gear. To put it simply, I hate this stupid fat fuck. But those bastards pale in comparison to the utter horseshit that is Onimaru. Onimaru, to sum it up, feels like a playable boss character that is not toned down for regular play. He plays like a Samurai Showdown character and deals the damage of one as well. He has reliable guard breaks and tons of ways to get in, and ways to dodge projectiles like nothing. This character is absolute horseshit to fight against. I fucking guarantee this bastard is the meta of the game, as I always run into one of these bitches in both casual and ranked play. And God help you if you're fighting a Wi-Fi Onimaru, as they will take advantage of the not as good netcode in that case. Speaking of the netcode, it uses rollback netcode, and for the most part, I feel the netcode works fine. And the crossplay is a neat addition. Too bad you can't actually reject certain opponents, as when the game finds you a match, you're automatically locked in to begin with. While this gets me plenty of games, and I'm never waiting in the training room, half the time I match with Switch Wi-Fi warriors who I guarantee are playing it at their local McDonald's going by their fucking terrible ping. I wish I could at least either set my network preferences to avoid Switch players or at least fight wireds only. Hell, this game should tell me if I'm fighting someone with a wired or Wi-Fi so I can avoid Wi-Fi warriors as much as possible. You know it's bad when Tekken 7, a game with spotty netcode, understands this much better. Hell, I hopped on a Tekken right after recording this footage and had a pretty decent match with a wired opponent because the game told me they were wired. And this was like my first match. So what the fuck is wrong here? And granted, Tekken had to add that in later, but other games like Skullgirls understood this mentality very well. And most other fighting games are also doing a good job telling me when they're wired, such as Mortal Kombat 11. So come on, I want to know if I'm fighting a wired or a Wi-Fi warrior. Dear Switch players, get yourselves one of these! All in all, this game is one hell of a mediocre package. Despite some good ideas, a lot of them fell flat thanks to lackluster execution. Now, I don't know where to talk about this, but this game has an in-game store that uses the Fortnite system. I bring this up as you can use the in-game currency to buy stuff here. What can you use for it besides cosmetics? You can subscribe to Fantasy Strike Premium. What does that get you? Replays. You have to pay to watch the replays. That is fucking scummy. And I mean, I know someone could go, well, why don't you just download OBS and record them like you did? Yeah, but I shouldn't have to if the game offers replays, just to see what I did wrong. And again, not everyone is going to be like me who records stuff for either streaming purposes or recording reviews like I am. Some casuals just might want to have an in-game replay feature to see what they did wrong in the actual game. And the thing is, not everyone's going to be playing on PC. They might be playing on PS4 or the Switch. All in all, due to this greed, my score for this game was bumped down from a 5 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10, because that is scummy as shit.
You suck.
My problem with the game lies not that it's a simple casual fighter. I've played simple casual fighters before that are quite fun. My problem is that it's a bad simple fighter. If you want something easy to pick up, I highly suggest you pick up Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, or you wait for the upcoming Project L. Stay far away from this abomination. It's very mediocre and not worth your time. It fails as a teaching tool, it fails as a deep experience, and it fails in a casual session. When Dive Kick is more complex than you
have a problem.
I believe you've suffered enough. Here's something for your troubles.
What are you up to this? Oh, it's the Cowabunga collection. Okay, I'll gladly play this. This is a lot of awesome games on here, like Turtles in Time, Manhattan Project, and Hyperstone Heist. And even the SNES version of Tournament Fighters. Those are awesome games.
Yes, you also get to play a classic from the NES.
On the NES? What the fuck is he talking about? Considering, I don't think he's talking about Manhattan Project, unless... Oh no. Oh well. It's a small price to pay for a lot of awesome games in this collection. Join us next time as we cover the Cowabunga collection to see if this is one shell of a time. Like, comment, and subscribe to my Patreon. See you all next time, boys and girls. Have a good day, everybody.